This is the Last Minute Blues Podcast with Alex Ferrario, Donnie Fandango, and Jeremy Rutherford on 101 ESPN.
The Last Minute Blues Podcast is presented by Blue Note Roofing. Roofing, siding, and gutters. Your St. Louis roofing experts. Visit BlueNoteRoofingSTL.com for free inspection.
All right, welcome. Another edition of the Last Minute Blues Podcast. It's brought to you by Blue Note Roofing, roofing, siding, and gutters. Your St. Louis roofing experts. Visit BlueNoteRoofingSTL.com for a free inspection. In the Jeff Burton Studios to talk about our St. Louis Blues and whatever it is that crosses our mind from 101 ESPN. Our dude Alex Ferrario, who also covers pre- and post-game for the Blues. And from The Athletic, Mr. Jeremy Rutherford. JR, how you doing today?
I'm going to point to the logo, and we can point to Alex's logo too there.
Look at us wearing the brands today.
Donnie, what do we got? The Interpreters?
Nah, the Interrupters.
Interrupters.
Yeah, punk rock band from Southern California. So I did not get that particular memo.
Man.
Guys, I want to let you know, first of all, I like to give you even more opportunities to make fun of me.
Okay.
And so I did something last night that I believe you'll get a chuckle out of, and hopefully the people will too. So sometimes Mary works late, and so I really enjoy doing dinner, all right? Like I have the time. My kids are older, so they're off doing their thing. And so, like, I just like the process of putting something on my phone and then, putting it together. And so Mary had left out a recipe for this baked cod dish for us last night. All right. Super easy. I mean, so easy. All right.
But
in the process of reading the directions, I read a 1/4 teaspoon of crushed red pepper flakes as...
Please don't tell me it's the other T word.
As a 1/4 cup.
What in the...
crushed red pepper flakes.
And you thought that was a good idea?
I tried to call Mary. She was on the way home and did not answer her phone.
You didn't think to go back to the recipe and double check it? Measure twice, cut once, Donnie.
I thought I did.
Oh, my God.
So I'm not a red pepper guy. My wife puts a lot of it on her pizza. What does that do? Just fire it up? Like that's just way too much in there?
It was...
Every bite?
It was so hot. And then on top of it, okay, so I guess because of there was so much of the red pepper flake, when I bit into the cod, it just tasted like this bitter, burnt. I was so friggin' mad at myself. And then Mary very nicely and very sweetly takes a bite and goes, she kind of doubles back and goes, how much red pepper flakes did you put in here? And I said, I followed the directions, a 1/4 cup. And she looked at me like you guys did, eyes bugging out, a 1/4 cup. And then she got up, got the directions, and it says a 1/4 teaspoon. And I was just like, I looked at it 10 times, guys. Like I was not trying to have,
it's not even looking at the recipe. It's holding a 1/4 cup of red chili pepper flakes to be like, yeah, this seems normal right now.
Like a 1/4 cup of anything would be a lot. Yeah.
So what you're saying is
your cod had to have just been covered by chili flakes, and you were like, this seems normal.
Well, I don't really have anything to say to myself.
I'm honestly surprised you're sitting here and that you're not sitting on like one of those inflatable donuts for your cornhole.
I did not eat very much. I mean,
you only had one bite?
We couldn't. So like I think Mary and I each took a bite, and then Mary said, I think I'm going to do something else. And so we had a rotisserie chicken in the fridge for something tonight. And so that got eaten last night. And my kids were just absolutely laughing their asses off at me through the whole thing.
When I was 12, this was the worst thing that I did.
A couple years ago.
Yeah, a couple years ago when I had less hair. I made Kool-Aid, and I thought I was putting sugar in it, and I put salt in it. Yeah. And you know how you make Kool-Aid. Like, you just, as a 12-year-old, you just dump, and like, yeah, that's probably good. You eyeballed it. My buddy took a drink of it and just spit red Kool-Aid all over my mom's cabinets. He's like, what the hell is this? I'm like, what? And I drank it like, did salt.
Yeah.
He's like, why are you so calm about that?
Yeah, but also, too, we got to clean this off of my mom's cabinets, and she's going to get pissed off.
Yeah, I wasn't worried about that as much as I was worried I ruined the Kool-Aid, man.
I went to McAllister's and opened up the sweeten load and dump it in the unsweetened tea and just dumped it all over my chili like I was supposed to. Like, it was like, what the heck am I doing?
You're like, why not, man? Let's enjoy some sweet chili.
Yeah.
Well,
remind me never to have dinner, though, over at Donnie's.
No, unless Mary's cooking, I would just absolutely not do that.
People over for that and pulled it out of the oven.
We're having red chili pepper cod.
The only way that it would have been fun is that if it would have been my mom and dad, because my dad, oh my God, until his last breath on this planet, would not let me hear the end of that.
Oh, yeah.
It would not let me hear the end of that. And he would, legitimately, I can see the look on his face when he's getting ready to tee me up. You know what I'm saying? And it would have just been that absolutely freaking nonstop.
Yeah, I still have that with mine. I see it in his face when he's teeing him up. Like, I'm going to walk away before this gets worse for me.
Right. Well, guys, we do have a bunch to talk about here when it comes to our St. Louis Blues. One of the things, though, that I meant to get to on the last podcast, but we had just ran out of time, was that it was very surprising to me. And again, this is over a week ago in which that I see this, but I'm perusing The Athletic. I'm looking at their big board, the big trade board for the NHL, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, higher than Braden Shin, higher than Falk, is Mr. Robert Thomas. Mm-hmm. And it seemed to me that all sort of thing kind of came out of nowhere, that because it seems primarily we've been talking about Shin and Falk, maybe Benner, but then it seems like this sort of Thomas thing kind of came out of nowhere. I think it makes sense, but I want to sort of talk, was there some sort of trigger? Did something happen to where all of a sudden he wasn't there and then he's there? Is that just a product of the team being the way that it is? Or am I just making too much of this because every once in a while I enjoy a good conspiracy theory?
Yeah, I think I can answer that in one sentence.
Yeah.
I think that when you are a national reporter like Chris Johnston, who does the trade board for The Athletic, you make routine phone calls with a number of executives or front office people. It doesn't always have to be the GM, and just say, what are you hearing? Mm-hmm. This is more than one sentence.
There was a comma or two or a semicolon in there. It's still
a fragment.
I still don't know how semicolons work, so I think one of those are used there.
That was more than one sentence.
I got about 5 sentences in. I was like, wait a minute.
That's going to be our tagline for this episode today. That was more than one sentence.
Yeah, everybody always says, Jeremy, long story short. But when he makes those phone calls, if he's on the phone and another team says, we got to talk to the Blues, they're wondering about Robert Thomas, our interest in him, here's the situation, then that's how a name gets on the trade board. And so that's why it can go from not being on there to suddenly being on there.
So this is a question for me, because I'm curious, because what Donnie saw is what I saw. It's not that just his name was on the trade board. It was on the trade board above Braden Shen, above Jordan Kyrou, above Jordan Binnington, and I think it was below Justin Falk, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. But they were like one after the other. How does it get that high up in Chris Johnston's board?
Well, so it's a great question. I don't pretend to know exactly how Chris operates with that board, but I think it's more headline type guys,
like big names,
than super high probability.
Gotcha.
Like, this is going to happen soon, so he's one or two or what have you. So I think everybody knows that the probability of a Shen, a Falk, a Binnington, is there. But when you are talking to league executives and you hear Robert Thomas's name, that's a name that's going to catch people's attention.
It skyrockets up there. I mean, for me, when I saw it, I was surprised, because you don't see number one centers on a trade board that often, especially ones controllable for where they're at. But then the more you think about it, common sense takes over, and it's like, well, yeah, this team has underperformed, not just this season, but for the last 4 seasons. Mm-hmm. Like, I went back and looked up until December 31st for the last 4 seasons, the Blues have either been a game below 500, a game above 500, or at 500. And that's December. Like, that's close to being 41 games into the season, and you're a 500 team. So what happens when you're consistently a 500 team? Well, you look to change the core of your roster. And we've talked about that before in the episode, that Doug Armstrong has said, look, everyone is a possibility because this team is not performing well. And then you go to, well, what's going to garner you the best return? Well, it's probably a center that people typically want around the National Hockey League. And I take no joy in talking about Robert Thomas this way, but he hasn't performed up to the level that the Blues need them to. Last night against the Winnipeg Jets, you want a perfect example of, now the Jets are a bad team, but who scored in that game for the Jets? Mark Scheifele, Josh Morrissey. Like they're best players. Your best players have underperformed this season. So if I'm Doug Armstrong and teams are calling me or I'm checking in with them, I think I have to put Robert Thomas's name in there, just like I have to put Kairu's name in there, just like I have to put Buchnevic's name in there. I got to make everyone available because this team is underperforming.
As a fan, pardon me, I believe that I can speculate. And so I would like to speculate a little bit.
All right.
Guys, do you think Robert Thomas is unhappy in St. Louis? Do you think that he is just sort of unhappy maybe with sort of the treading in water that has been like what you were saying about the Blues for the last few years outside of the crazy run towards the end of last year? Do you think that maybe homeboy is looking for a life change? Maybe he doesn't want to be the guy here. Like, do you buy into any of that?
I don't think he's unhappy in St. Louis. Then that makes it seem like he's not happy with the city or the team hasn't treated him well. I don't think that's it. I think he's, and again, me speculating here, I wonder if he's unhappy with where the team is at. And I look at that and say, like, well, yeah, he came to the Blues and they were a Stanley Cup winner. He was a Stanley Cup contender consistently, and then they've gone into a down spiral. And now they're not only treading water, but their heads are going down under the water and coming back up. Like, I have to wonder, like, if you're 26 years old and if I'm Robert Thomas, I'm looking around saying I signed a contract extension because I thought this was going to go in the other direction, and it hasn't. Now you're bringing in younger players, and it's going to take some time. I'm looking around, and the main guys that are supposed to be leading the way have underperformed like I have underperformed. So that would be my only thing is, like, I don't think he's like doesn't like St. Louis and wants out. I think this is I'm not happy where the team is at. But I can also look at that and say, but you're part of that problem too. Like if the team is underperforming and you're not happy, you're the number one center that they paid to take them out of this dull that they're in.
Yeah, I don't think he's unhappy. I know for a fact, though, that he's really disappointed that he doesn't want to play out the prime years of his career in a situation like this. So maybe more so than disappointment or unhappy, it'd be frustrated. But as Alex said, yeah, there's room to be frustrated with the situation around you. You know, in the article today, Alex in The Athletic, I tried to point out that his goals per 60 this year aren't far off than what they've been the past couple years, but his assists per 60 are down. And if you look at Buchnevich and Kairu, obviously their scoring is down. So how much is this Robert Thomas? How much is it the guys aren't finishing the goals? And again, that's not to take Thomas off the hook. We all know that he could be better, but there's got to be some frustration in his mind with what he has around him in terms of trying to get this thing going. Now, I think everybody would agree, you know, he can do a better job of taking charge and doing that. So yeah, I don't think he's unhappy. I don't have any concrete information that, you know, he's asked for a trade, anything like that. I just think that if the Blues, Alex said it a second ago, you know, Doug's got to look at it. Who can you get the most for? I would have taken it a step further and say that he might be the only guy that you can get something for at this point. Like, let's face it, teams aren't blowing up Doug Armstrong's phone trying to get Pavel Buchnevich. Like they're not perhaps blowing up his phone trying to get Jordan Kyrou. So if you have fans saying you need to break up these big three, like we've talked about in past weeks, and you know, if Doug were sitting in this chair, last week could have been this chair, but and he says, look, okay, how are we breaking this up? Because I'm not getting calls on a couple of these guys. I can trade Robert Thomas tomorrow, but you might not like the return. Like, yeah, that's where he's at.
That would have been gold, by the way, if Zane just did a two-shot of the seat and been like, wait a minute, what's going on here right now? See, this is why I brought it up. I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago. This is why, like, I look at it, and as much as people are frustrated with Robert Thomas, I get it. I also think, like, has he been given the right tools to succeed as a number one center? Yeah. And I saw that same chart that you're talking about on The Athletic that you and Shayna did. And it's like you see his assists per 60 and expected goals. And it's like, yeah, he's at the top of the chart. He's the best player on the team. And then you look at the guys around and say, well, yeah, they've gone through Snuggerud. They've done Holloway. They've done Kyrou. They've done Buchnevich. They've done Neighbors. They've done Bergeron, Stenberg. They've put everybody on that wing. and they're not scoring. Now, I can totally hear the argument. It's like that sliding scale to where one side of it, well, yeah, isn't that on Thomas to make those guys better? Sure. But if I'm giving guys that aren't going to put the puck in the back of the net, my job as a distributor, I'm giving them the chances, they're not finishing. So, like, it's a really tough situation to be in. And the hardest part with Robert Thomas is you just don't trade number one centers. But if this team is now transitioning to another core of Holloway and Neighbors and Snuggerud and Dvorsky and the potential of a high draft pick this year, you're 2 to 3 years away from getting to that level. He's going to be 29, 30 years old at that time. So if I'm Thomas, I'm looking at it saying, like, are my prime years going to be wasted here? But if I'm the Blues, I'm looking at, does he match the timeline now? Because we don't have the guys around him.
Right. All right. And I know, pardon me. So I know you guys talked about compensation and in the athletic article today, JR. So what would a trade for Robert Thomas even remotely even look like?
Well, that's the tough part. Is Alex and I were talking before the pod, is that there just aren't a lot of trades like that are made. And each one that is made, there's kind of a unique circumstance behind it. Like you can look at Eichel, but he's a number 2 overall pick. Yeah. There's different circumstances, so it's tough. But I would say that the question before you get to that question is, what would the Blues be looking for in return? Because if you want to talk about, okay, what could a trade look like? What are the Blues looking for? And, it could be 2 very, very good prospects. Like, it might not be you're looking for a 25, 24-year-old center to come in, and maybe he's not a Robert Thomas, but, he's got potential, and you just hope for the best. Maybe it's not that. So if the Blues, I don't want to say they're going to take a step back, but I think based on what we've seen this year, they're realizing that it's probably going to take some more time than they originally thought. And perhaps if you can go out and get, a couple great prospects in an organization. I know in baseball, Alex, you guys always talk about, the top 50 prospects for each organization. And, the Cardinals just got number 2 and 12 from the Red Sox. Maybe it's the Blues going and grabbing a, number 2 and number 5 prospect from an organization that can come in and help.
No, I'm just, because this is what my brain does. I start going to this and think like, okay, well, if you were to make a trade, who would you go to? I've brought up Montreal on BK and Ferrario before because they're talking about needing another center, and it's thinking, okay, well, they'd get a win now. They've got a kid who's playing in college right now who was a 21st overall pick. His name's Michael Haig. He's playing in college, putting together some numbers, and looks like he could be a top center, if not a top 6 center. Like, I think what you're doing if you're trading Robert Thomas is, like JR mentioned, you're looking for a couple of top prospects that are somewhere between 21 and 22 years old to match the same timeline as Snuggerud and Dvorsky and Carbonneau and all of those guys. That's that core you're shifting it to. But I also think you have to isolate it a little further, and I think you have to look for a centerman. You've got nothing in your system minus Dalibor Dvorsky as a center. The potential of a top 2 pick, those are both wingers in Gavin McKenna and Ivar Stenberg. And you're not going anywhere until you find a center. Like San Jose is a perfect example. How'd they turn this around so fast? Well, they found an alien in Macklin Celebrini. You've got to find a center. So if I'm going to move a centerman, I'm going to want a younger centerman in return, but it's got to be the guy that can step in. And the one comp that I came up with, and I mean, you've got to go in the way back tank for this one if you trade Robert Thomas. I don't know if you guys remember Mike Richards when he was traded from, I think it was Philly to LA. LA was trying to win now, and they did win a few cups. And then Mike Richards was 26 years old in Philly, and he kind of put up the same point production as Robert Thomas. He was a really good two-way centerman. They traded him for a 21-year-old Braden Shen and a 23-year-old Wayne Simmons, and then they got a first-round pick as well. If you're going to trade, that's the type of move I think you're looking for. A young guy who's a top pick, who's going to come in and fits more into that timeline that you're looking for. And it paid off for Philadelphia because both Wayne Simmons and Braden Shen were good for them for some time.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, and Richards goes to L.A., helps them, and this could be a situation, and again, I'm not trying to forecast a trade or anything like that, but, their teams would be lining up for a Thomas at the right price.
Yeah.
On Minnesota Wild, they listed him as, that'd be the dream scenario if Robert Thomas went there. So a team that's ready to win right now, if they take on a Robert Thomas, they'll give you that 21st pick overall from a couple years ago, who, might be a great player, but he's not helping them win now.
Now, that's the one real quick, Donnie, that if I know I've said this before to where it's like, I don't care where I trade as long as I get the best player available. I don't know if I'm trading in my own division.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to watch a 26-year-old for the next 6 years go out and have a better, because look, this is the other thing with Robert Thomas, and the same can be said about Jordan Kyrou. There is a real chance that those guys go on wherever they get moved and have a different view on life because they got traded. And sometimes, I mean, Vince Dunn is a perfect example of this. He was outspoken about how when he was moved to Seattle, it was kind of an eye-opener for him, and it opened up his game. There's a real chance that both guys, if get moved, go on to have success elsewhere. But I also think fans in St. Louis have to have the bigger picture and say, was it ever going to work out here? Because there's been a lot of complaints about those players over the last few years.
Well, and also, too, I think for both of those guys, in Kyrou and Thomas, if they get traded, whether it be, this season, in the offseason, what have you, they're probably going to go somewhere where they're not going to be relied on to be the man.
Yeah.
Or they are going to be a part of a successful top 6 or top 9. So they're not going to have to be the one. And it almost feels like, to me, to a certain degree, and I don't mean to say this negatively, but that Robert Thomas's personality might not lend to him to want to be the guy.
Like the guy in the spotlight.
He wants to be there on the peripheral, but he doesn't want to be the one.
Right. Could you imagine, I know you said about the division, but could you imagine if Thomas went to Minnesota and he's got Kaprizov, he's got Boldy, he's got Quinn Hughes. So
yeah,
that makes me nauseous.
Yeah. I mean, there is something real to that. Like sometimes guys flourish when they're not the one that has to stand in front of the camera every single time something goes wrong or answer all of the questions when something goes wrong. A lot of guys want to be somebody that wears the letters, somebody wants to be the leader, but then when things are bad, it forces you to steer away from your game and focus on everyone else's game. Mm-hmm. And that can be tough. So I do wonder if he's given the right situation, he doesn't have to be the number one guy. He can go off and he can just be the number one guy, but behind somebody who's already in the spotlight.
Absolutely.
The same can be said for Kyrou as well.
Yeah, man, that guy, I just wonder if that guy, not that he, again, doesn't like the city of St. Louis, but he's just like, I just want these people off my nuts. You know what I mean? He just wants to play and not have the constant cycle. All right, so let's do this. Let's take a break. Let's come back and talk about Steve Ott. All right. Another segment, Last Minute Blues podcast, coming your way next. So we can call him a friend of the show because he was on the show once. But Steve Ott gets reassigned this week and is now the head coach of the Springfield Thunderbirds for the remaining part of the year. And so as I'm thinking about this in my brain, I'm thinking to myself, hey, good for Otter. He's going to get himself some head coaching experience. And then I start thinking to myself, wait. Does Steve Ott want to go from being an NHL NHL assistant coach to going down to essentially AAA, AHL to be a head coach? Is this a good career move for him? Is this not a good career move for him? This all, as much as I read your article and that it's this is just what it is. Kind of Walchuk wasn't getting the job done. Mm-hmm. We think Otter might have the opportunity. I don't know, guys. There feels like there might be a little something more to this than it just being what they have told us that it is.
So I had the Thunderbirds play-by-play man on pregame with me to talk about the whole situation, and he said, it's going to be not an eye-opener because Steve Ott has done this before. He's seen it before, but, imagine flying private jets and 5-star hotels for 9 years, and now there's going to be a lot of bus rides and, staying in different hotels, and that's just what this is. But Steve Ott wanted to be a head coach in the National Hockey League. Mm-hmm. And to be a head coach in the National Hockey League, you have to be a head coach somewhere. Mm-hmm. Unless you're Rod Brindamore or Marty St. Louis. So basically, you got to be a Hockey Hall of Famer, and then you can just get an NHL head coaching job with no experience. And that's not Steve Ott. He's been an assistant coach for 9 years. He's had interviews for NHL jobs, I think, the last couple of years. He's never gotten anything. So I think this was the Blues saying, look, this team is not performing well. We're probably going in a different direction at some point. I don't think the Blues are ever going to fire Steve Ott. Mm-hmm. But they also looked at it and said, you want to be a head coach, don't you? We need a head coach in the AHL because these guys aren't getting it done, whether it's Connor Walchuk or whatever. They're not performing to the level we need them to. We need you to go to the AHL and fix this. And the moment you fix this, NHL teams are going to be looking at it and say, yeah, Steve Ott's ready for an NHL head coaching job. So I think a lot of people saw it as a demotion. I looked at it as, yeah, he's going to a lower level league, but he's also going to get closer to having an NHL job by going to an AHL team as the head coach.
Yeah, and you can't look at this situation without prefacing it with Doug Armstrong has been in lockstep with Steve Ott for years. Like, he brought him here to be an assistant coach. He's been here for 9 years. Guys don't last 9 years in the NHL behind any bench, especially behind multiple coaches.
Yeah.
Like, you don't think when he goes to Drew Bannister, hey, look, Steve Ott's staying. You know, goes to Jim Montgomery, not that he had to twist Montgomery's arm, but say, hey, look, you know, Steve Ott's here. So I think it's a situation, especially when you bring in Alexander Steen. Like, Steen and Ott are teammates. Like, they are as tight as can be. And so, yes, I would have loved to have heard that conversation when they broached it with Steve and said, hey, would you go to Springfield? And you know, how that conversation played out. But, you know, if there's two things that Steve Ott is, it's a hard worker and gritty. So he was probably like, give me that bus.
Yeah,
like, give me that bus. Give me that 8-hour bus ride. You know, let's go down there and get these guys, you know, going in the right direction. And so, Donnie, you know, we've talked about the past couple of days, we did it on BK and Ferrario. People are saying, was this a way to push Steve out of the Blues staff because things haven't been going well with the team and the power play? Hey, listen, I'm not going to ignore that question,
right?
Because I feel like it's legitimate. There could have been changes. And if he didn't have that relationship with management, maybe he could have been pushed out this coming offseason. But there's too much respect for Steve Ott with this management staff. And that's why they don't just give that opportunity to anybody.
Right.
They're giving it to him because of the respect they have for him.
It's also kind of weird to me to see people pick apart the power play so much when the entire team has had deficiencies all the way around. So it almost feels weird to kind of super put the spotlight on the power play and on Ott as well.
I've hated that narrative for the longest time, and it's been going on for multiple years now of, well, the power play's bad because Steve Ott doesn't know what he's doing. He's lost his job. Didn't they give his job to Craig McTavish one year? Like, he's lost his job as the power play coach. He doesn't know what he's doing. I haven't been in the room when they work on this. I've just heard people talk about it, and I've heard players talk about it. Steve Ott has them prepared on the power play. The problem has always been personnel on the power play. Now, you can have your qualms about who they're using on certain power plays of, you know, Oscar Sundqvist on a power play unit or putting, you know, Justin Falk and not Colton Parayko on a unit. However, sure, I'll listen to that. But go back, they haven't been a top 10 power play since 2021, 2022. And that was when they had Ryan O'Reilly, Vladimir Tarasenko, David Perron. Like, they had one-time shots. They had incredible bumpers. They had a threat with his shot. They haven't had that for multiple years now. Like, they don't have a one-time shot. They're starting to get it with Snuggerud and Dvorsky, but they don't have one. They have way too predictable of a power play because they don't have guys who can move the puck quick enough. They don't have guys who can threaten the goaltender on both sides of the post, and you force plays. So it's not like Steve Ott just sees the same play that hasn't been working for 5 straight games and says, you know what, boys, it'll work at some point. Go out there and fix it. They try and fix it. You can only do so much when you've got the same guys trying to fix a power play, and none of them have the tools that you need on a power play.
And Donnie, when Monty was here as a assistant coach before he came back as head coach, he was in charge of the power play, and it wasn't going well. And they made a change, and they put Steve Ott in charge of that power play, and I believe it finished top 5.
Yeah, I think that was the year.
In the league that year. And you had the O'Reillys, you had the Perrons. And so, look, the power play hasn't been good for a long time now. It's been, what, with 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, it's like 16th, 18th, 21st, 22nd or something like that.
Yeah, and Steve Ott's been in charge of it for the most of that time. So, yes, it's under his watch. So, you know, he has to accept some of that blame, right? But as Alex said, it's the personnel. Now, the question I have is, when you have a bunch of perimeter passing and nobody's taking it to the net and there's nobody willing to go to the net front, you know, as the coach, can he do some things to change that? Like, what do? Do you say, okay, Kyrou, you're off the power play, and I'm going to put Otto Stenberg on there because you're just shooting from the perimeter. I guess you can do those things, but at some point you have to have your top players out there executing and performing. So I, like Alex, I put it on the personnel.
I look at how many shot first mentality guys do you have on this team?
Oh, gosh.
Snuggerud, Kyrou,
Dvorsky. Maybe.
I don't know if I put Dvorsky in that right now. I mean, he had
You're right. You know what?
Good game.
Yeah.
I think I got two guys. I think I got two guys that are shot first mentality. Maybe Holloway, he's been at times. Man, that's not enough.
Also, too, I would like to say the most obvious thing about this team. They just severely lack a legit freaking finisher.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many freaking times where they have got a shot, and I mean they're right there, and and they don't score, and you're just like, man, an elite finisher would absolutely have finished that play and made that happen. And it just seems like, and I know that's easier said than done and all of those sorts of things, but man, it just seems like it is glaring lately with this team, especially with offensive chances when they do get them.
And that goes back to the Thomas conversation of like, he's creating the opportunities. They're just not going into the back of the net. Some of that is the development. Like Jimmy Snuggerud is, I think he's got like something like 56, 57 shot attempts in his last 6 games. He's got the shot first mentality right now. You're seeing Stenberg and Dvorsky, and Carbonneau seems like he could be that finisher. So you've got things coming, but now it's the patience game, which nobody wants to have because of what they did last year and making it almost to the second round of the playoffs. But some of these guys just have to figure out how to play at the NHL level, and you're not there yet with some of them.
All right, I want to do this. Let's take one more break. I want to come back. I want to talk about another bit of a lightning rod that has seemed to be mentioned a lot in maybe not a super positive way here lately with our St. Louis Blues defenseman. I'll give you that little bit of a tease. Back for the final segment of the Last Minute Blues podcast coming next. Guys, we got an email about it. I also had Tommy the Boss complaining about him last week. Now, I am a fan of this guy, so this is when kind of my fandom takes over. But guys, I have seen a lot of people bitching about Colton Parayko. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on that. It's hard for me to get sort of a read on it with the team being the way in which that they have been. I know he doesn't have any goals, I believe, this year, if I'm not mistaken. And that was something that, oh boy, got Tommy the Boss kind of teed off. But I feel like with Colton Parayko, I mean, you still have a guy that plays a ton of minutes, is only making $6.5 million a year. I don't know. Talk to me about Colton.
I look at Colton and I feel like, you know, his season hasn't been a great one. Obviously, I can't believe that he doesn't have a goal.
I can't either.
I can't believe it. Like, we saw the offense last year, and I know sometimes it goes in and sometimes it doesn't, but to have it that drastic, what was it, 16 last year? And nothing so far. I don't get it. Now, you can look at the defensive problems the team has had all year long, and that just gets everybody off kilter, right? And they're not playing their game. That's not to make an excuse. It's just what it is this year. Look at Cam Fowler. You know, doesn't look like, you know, the same type of player. You would think at some point you figure it out and maybe a puck goes in for you and then you get some traction and then you start scoring. To me, Colton Parayko has always been, this is going to be kind of like a contradictory words, but a dynamic, bland player. Like he is.
That's the perfect description of Colton Parayko.
He is dynamic. He does everything, but it's just bland. Like it just gets done, but you want there to be more there. In terms of the offense, there just has to be. I know he's not on the power play, but you know you need some 5-on-5 goals, or at least you need that shot to lead to some goals in front. You know, some dirty rebound goals, and that hasn't been there either. I honestly, like, looking at Colton Parayko, unless you sit down and study the film, I haven't seen like a huge difference in him compared to previous years. It's just you look at the numbers and the numbers aren't there. I don't know if you see something different.
This is where I'm at. Like, I think people have a tendency in the NHL today to hear number one defenseman and think, oh, well, he's going to put up 20 goals because of Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes. And man, that's not that number one defenseman. Like, he is a top pair guy. He's not a number one guy, if that makes sense. He's not going to put up a ton of points or a ton of goals for you. Broberg's got the potential to be that now that he's getting some power play time, but that's never been Colton Parayko. He'll have games where he scores or seasons where he scores 10, 12 goals, but his game is always defense. And then the offense comes at times when he goes up the rush. But what you said is what my conspiracy theory has been on this all along. I really wonder, because it's not just Parayko. Fowler's offense is dipped. Broberg's offense is dipped. The only guy that offense hasn't dipped is Justin Falk. I mean, even Tyler Tucker. Tyler Tucker was looked like a godsend for everybody last year before he got injured, and now you're not seeing that. I really wonder if the switch that they made to man-to-man defense has altered the way that defensemen play in the offensive zone. Because there's so much focus now when you're playing man-to-man defense of making sure that you've got your guy, that everybody else has their guy, and so that you can't really get as aggressive in the offensive zone, because the moment you push, if somebody doesn't have their guy, well, now everything's in flux. And some of the forwards have struggled this season on the defensive side. So I think what JR said is where I'm at. I really wonder, they stopped playing that zone defense early on in the season because it was not going well. But I wonder if it wasn't going well because the goaltenders were struggling early on and they had to make a change, and you had to. Man-to-man has worked at times, at other times it hasn't. Defensively, you still give up a lot of goals. Maybe you're not giving up as many chances as you were before, but now offensively, you've just gone dry. You were dry earlier, but again, I'm trying to figure it out like it's some type of Jenga puzzle, and I don't know. But it does feel like that you're seeing an offensive dip from Fowler, Parayko, and even Broberg because these guys are playing a different style of defense than they're accustomed to.
So just so that I fully understand this. So essentially, to sort of settle down the defensive mess that was earlier in the year, they switched up defensive systems with the problem that we're seeing now is that because they are playing man, you are not able to kind of run the offense a little bit more like you were when you're in zone.
And you can, like, their offense wasn't there at the beginning of the season either when they were playing zone, but that's because the puck was in the back of their net all the time. Yeah. And Alex is right. I just look at it like hockey is a game of rhythm. And when you see a team in their stride, you know, Colton Parayko or Broberg or whoever, you know that, okay, here's the shot coming in, Sonny's blocking that, the rebound's going to kick out, this guy's going to pick it up, and I'm going. And you're just going. And it's just a mindset of you're playing as a group of five. Mm-hmm. And I think what we've seen this year, it's just been so loosey-goosey that it just gets you out of your game, and it can be a split second in the NHL, but you're not up the ice, and now they're beating you back to the ice, and you're not able to set up or get a shot that creates a rebound that does it, and you're just out of, you know, like I said, off kilter.
And that's the other thing too, like in the offensive zone, like part of the reason you're not seeing these guys score goals is because they have to score goals from the blue line. Mm-hmm. There's no offensive zone time. There's no rhythm that JR's talking about. Like watching that Jets game, all one and done. Mm-hmm. Puck goes in, puck gets shot, misses the net, comes out, you're chasing it, and then you got to get off the ice and get a new line on there to take a new shift. Like, there's no rhythm. Last year when they were on their game and they were going on that run, and really from the Winter Classic on last season, it was puck would go in, be in there for a good 30 seconds. You'd get a couple of new bodies out there, and you're forcing the opposition to just turn the puck over and go right back into the zone. Man, there's no zone time from this team. There's no rhythm. There's no ability to forecheck and just cycle the puck, which the defensemen, you've got a lot of mobile defensemen that can jump in as forwards and create offense. But when there's no offensive zone time and you hold it for 10 seconds, you're chasing the game.
But to circle back to your question, like, you know, even in Louis had 16 last year, he's had, 3 other years? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, he should be stumbling into double 6 digits. Or 8 or 10 at this point. But I think I go back to when I sat down with Justin Falk and I said, hey, you're leading the team in goals with 11. You know, last year you had 4. You know, what's the difference? He goes, sometimes. So you can look at it both ways. You're looking at it with Colton Parayko, they're not going in. Well, they are going in for Justin Falk, and you know, it's being assertive. It's playing aggressive like Falk has been.
And as much as people don't like Parayko because he's not putting up 15 goals, pluck him out of your lineup, and now you're having Justin Falk play 23 minutes a night, and you're having Logan Mailloux play 22 minutes a night. You okay with that?
We're not there yet.
Yeah. You could get upset all you want, but it's not like he's making $10.5 million and he's hurting your team. He's making $6.5 million and playing 23 minutes a night and still very valuable defensively. It's just the offensive numbers haven't been there. But honestly, they really haven't been there that much in his career.
It's really pretty crazy to me how it almost doesn't even matter the sport. But that sort of rhythm thing really works in every single one of them.
Yeah.
That is a really great way to say it. And this entire season, the Blues have seemed completely off track, completely off kilter. And at no point does it feel as though that they've got into a rhythm. And I just remember last year during that run, obviously you're winning a bunch of games, but you just knew what you were going to see out of that Blues team that night. And we just don't see that anymore.
No, everybody is off. And I think a lot of it is because the pucks aren't going into the back of the net. A lot of it is because you get chasing hockey games. And a lot of it is lack of confidence. You've got one side of the group who are guys that are expecting to win right now, like a Kyrou and Thomas and a Buchnevich because they've been here long enough. And then you've got another group of guys that are Snuggerud and Dvorsky and Stenberg that are trying to figure out the NHL level. And you're trying to mesh them together, all while figuring out a little bit of a new system on defense, all while trying to figure out why they can't score any goals.
Oh, real quick. Will that defensive system stick next year as well?
That's a good question. I mean, they could switch back to zone.
Yeah.
Guess it depends on who the assistant coach is.
Who the coaches are.
Weber's there or not.
The personnel, things like that. But yeah, it's a good question.
Boy, this is going to be on all fronts, player-wise, coach-wise, a tumultuous, and I got to use the word, tumultuous offseason, right?
Do you use your word of the day?
Wait, tumultuous? No, because that could lead to being negative.
Yeah, I think it's negative connotation.
Yeah, and I don't want to do that.
JR just coming in with that vocab on you.
Yeah, right. But there's going to be a lot going on player-wise, coach-wise with this team.
Yeah.
Do you guys think it's going to be active before? And I know Rasmus Anderson got traded to Vegas. Do you think it's going to be active before they go to the Olympics? Or you think predominantly the big stuff is going to happen after the fact, I would assume?
Well, the one thing that I heard is, and I would like to double check this before I say it again, but I feel like I've said it enough, is the cap is going to be on teams' payroll throughout the Olympics when they're shut down. So that might lend you to believe that teams might not take on those players until after the Olympics. And what is there, 12 days between the February 22nd,
once they're back.
Maybe a little more than 12.
March 6th is the deadline.
March 6th, yeah. So there's about a 10 or 12 day period after they get back from the Olympic break before the trade deadline where you could see some more.
I think you're going to see more trades after the Olympic break because I think there's still some teams that are worried about players they trade for if they're going to the Olympics.
Get hurt at the Olympics.
What they look like on the other end of it.
Absolutely.
So I think they let the dust settle. You may see a little trade here and there, but I think the dust settles, and specifically on the Blues front. If I'm Doug Armstrong, I'm waiting until after the Olympic break and closer to the deadline because that's when teams get desperate.
Right, and you're going to want to try to maximize. Yeah. Obviously, you're going to want to try to maximize. The entire time that we're talking about the Blues being out of rhythm, all I can think about is the Bills' offense being out of rhythm. I got to end this podcast. We're going to start talking about the Bills. All right, thank you guys, as always, for listening to the Last Minute Blues podcast. Well, there were some emails that we didn't get to today. Keep those bad boys coming. And honestly, with the Olympic break coming up, it's actually going to be a really good time for us to be able to knock out a bunch of emails because it's not like we're going to have a ton to talk about outside of, especially early on in the Olympic break. So get those over to LMBP at 1057thepoint.com. It's the Last Minute Blues podcast. Thank you as always for listening and watching. Jeremy Rutherford from The Athletic, Alex Ferrario from 101 ESPN. I'm Donnie Fandango. Thank you as always for listening and watching. I just said that. And as always, let's go Blues.
The Last Minute Blues podcast on 101 ESPN
is presented by Blue Note Roofing. Roofing, siding, and gutters. Your St. Louis roofing experts. Visit BlueNoteRoofingSTL.com for free inspection.